coming over to the US, it was a big step on the competitive side of things because you're exposed to more competitive players. I mean, we're playing against the best in the world like every single week. So your game sort of has to step up another level if you want to be the best. And for me, like my goal in the end is to be on the LPGA and playing professional golf. So with all the practice that we put in, competing every second week, I think it's really helped my game progress in the right direction.
Maddie, how does it feel to be a Big 12 champ?
It's kind of surreal. I don't think it's really set in yet. It's been a pretty crazy week as a whole, so I'm trying to soak in the victory as much as I can, but I mean, we've still got a couple of tournaments left to play, so you get that little bit of glory and then it's back to work, basically.
How extra special was your Big 12 individual win, considering it was also your first win of the season?
I feel like I've been playing really well the whole season so far, and I've placed in the top 10 and I've put myself into contention a lot of times. So it's kind of been frustrating that I hadn't got that win yet, but everything sort of came together the other day at the perfect time, and to get that first win of the season just felt amazing, and to have my parents here as well, like that was even better. So it was kind of just the perfect moment.
There it is. Boy, she was clutch coming down the stretch with that putter. Look at that smile.
I think she knows what that putt means. She was the up and down queen on this backside.
When did they fly in for the tournament?
They flew in last Wednesday night, which was the night before the practice round.
Are they still here?
Yeah, they are.
How long will they be here?
They're here until Sunday.
Nice.
Yeah, so they got to watch the tournament and then they'll be here for another couple of days and then fly back home.
You entered the final round of the Big 12 tournament in a three-way tie for first. How much was that on your mind entering that round?
Quite a lot, I would say. I mean, I know I'm in contention and it's like you have to post a good round in the final day to give yourself a chance. And the girls that I was tied at the top with, I mean, I was tied with Clem, who's my teammate, obviously, which was awesome to have two of us at the top of the leaderboard. But then the girl from Iowa State, I mean, she's such a strong player as well. So you know you have to go out there and produce your best golf that you possibly can with the conditions and the weather and stuff. So, I mean, it's on my mind, but I'm just going out there to do my best, I guess.
At what point in that round did you realize you could actually win it all?
I think when I had my birdie on the second hole, I knew that I was off to a good start and probably giving myself a better chance. But I mean, there's still so much golf to play at that point, and there's so many difficult holes on that golf course. So you never really know if you're comfortable in a position. And I mean, hole 16 was probably the toughest hole of the week, and I saw a lot of big scores on that hole coming in on the last day. So I never get too comfortable. I still keep pushing as much as I can and just play my game. But I think on that last putt, when that went in, I was like the biggest sigh of relief that it actually went in the hole.
You mentioned getting the birdie on the second hole. You actually broke the program record for par or better rounds in the Big 12 tournament with 51 for your career, and you've done that in 84 career rounds. The next four golfers played at least 107 rounds. What do you think that says about your golf game?
I think it's just the consistency of it. I feel like my game, my whole life has been very consistent. I never really have, if I have a bad day, like it's not a whole heap over par, like I'm generally only one or two over. So I think it's just the consistency. And I feel like in a way that's really beneficial for the team as well, because you know kind of what you're gonna get with me in a sense. And a lot of the girls on the team are like that. They're very consistent, and you're gonna get majority of the time good scores from them as well.
Your season scoring average is just under 71 points, which is the second best in program history. How do you think you've evolved from the time you started your Oklahoma State career to now?
I didn't even know that. I think coming over to the US, I think the competition back home was always strong, but you're always playing against the same kind of girls day in and day out. And I think coming over to the US, it was a big step on the competitive side of things, because you're exposed to more competitive players. I mean, we're playing against the best in the world like every single week. So your game sort of has to step up another level if you want to be the best. And for me, like my goal in the end is to be on the LPGA and playing professional golf. So with all the practice that we put in, competing every second week, I think it's really helped my game progress in the right direction.
You're from Perth, Australia, so you are a long way from home.
Yes.
How did you end up at Oklahoma State?
I actually got recruited by Coach Maddy in 2019 at my US Junior qualifier. I think at the time Maddy and Greg, they had just got their job here at OSU, and Maddy was actually getting ready to like pack up and move down here. And I think it was like a couple of days before she left, she came and watched me at this qualifier, and she came and introduced herself afterwards. This was all in like June or July, and then I came on an official visit in the September of that year, and then graduated high school in October, and then I think I committed in like the end of November. So it was a very, very quick process.
How did you graduate high school in October?
So our school years back home start in January, and they finish in like the very beginning of December, but as a senior, or back home we call it year 12, you graduate in October and then you do your final exams in November.
What happens if you fail your final exams after you've graduated?
It doesn't matter, really, because our graduation certificate is like an accumulation of everything you do in your junior and your senior year, and you get what's called an ATAR, which is basically an average of all your scores from the whole 2 years. And that's how you get into university, basically.
Official visit was in the summer, graduate in October, commit November.
Yes.
When did you arrive on campus?
Well, with COVID, I didn't end up coming until the January in 2021. I was meant to start in the August of 2020, but with everything that was going back home with COVID, like our borders were shut down, our embassies closed, so I actually couldn't get an appointment to get a visa in time. So I ended up studying online for 6 months back in Australia, and then I came over. I got a visa literally 2 weeks before I was meant to come in January, and ended up coming over and starting in the January.
How hard was that for you?
It was pretty full on. I think in hindsight, it actually ended up being a good thing because the American system is very different to what I was used to back home. So I got sort of a feel for how the school stuff kind of worked anyway to start off, which was good. The only thing I really missed out on was playing a couple of tournaments in the fall. And I mean, I couldn't really leave the country, so I just had to sort of put up with the situation and wait until I got my visa. But it was a bit of a struggle, but I made it eventually.
Australia had some of the strictest COVID lockdown laws. Were you able to get out and still practice your golf game during that time?
Yes, but there was quite a few restrictions on it. Our golf club back home did shut down for quite a while, and we didn't get to practice for a couple of months. And then when everything opened back up, there was pretty strict regulations on it. Like, we were only allowed to play within our family. So my dad and my sister and I, we were only allowed to play with each other. There was no pins in the hole, so we were going out and sort of guessing where the holes were. And there was one day we went out and played and like had no idea, and I ended up shooting 8 under, which was like crazy, which was really fun. But yeah, like I think we were closed for nearly 6 months at the time, and we didn't even have any COVID cases. They were just so worried about the whole situation.
During those 6 months where things were pretty much shut down, what did you do to keep your golf game up?
Just little bits here and there. I tried to go up to the golf club and just use my own golf balls and hit some range shots as much as I could. We were still allowed to go up and like use our own balls. There wasn't any restrictions on that. You just had to pick them up yourself, which is what we do out here anyway. So in hindsight, it was kind of practice for that. But then, I mean, a little bit of putting at home here and there. I actually worked at Kmart while over the COVID period for like 10 months. So that kept me very busy. And obviously the studying in between doing the school stuff over here while I was back home.
You said you would go out and golf with your dad and your sister. How did you first get into the sport?
Dad was the one that got me into the sport to start with, I think when I was like 2 years old. My mum's always worked at the airport back home and done a lot of shift work, so she would like have me during the day while Dad was at work, and then when Dad came home from work it would be sort of like a tag team situation, and Mum would go and work at the airport at night, and Dad would want to go to the golf course and practice, so he would take me up with him. I had a plastic set of Thomas the Tank Engine golf clubs, and he would set me up against the back of our range on the wall, and I'd hit my little plastic ball while he was doing his stuff out onto the course.
Is your sister as big of a golfer as you are?
She's gotten into it over the last couple of years a lot more. She's 17 and she's probably been playing for a lot of her life, but she's done a lot of other things as well and only really just become pretty competitive with golf over the last couple of years. She was actually the captain of our state team just recently, like 2 weeks ago, and I think the team came like second or third, which is awesome for Western Australia. And I was the captain of the team like 4 or 5 years ago as well, so I was super happy when she was announced captain because it was kind of like a sister duo kind of thing.
How exciting is WA golf at the moment?
I think it's really good to see how everyone's going. We've got some really good young players coming through, and yeah, I think I'll go watch the boys tomorrow, give them a bit of a cheer on, and hopefully they can do well and get the win as well. But yeah, we're doing really strong at the moment.
Were you voted captain or named captain? How did that work?
We were named captains by like our coaches and the people involved in the state sort of system. They sort of nominate a captain, and yeah, I was very surprised that she was captain, but I was also super happy for her.
You were surprised your sister was captain?
Well, I mean, she's not considered the best golfer out of like the group of girls and guys that were there. But I mean, I think in a sense of leadership, she's probably the most mature out of all of them and definitely deserved to be captain.
You said you've been golfing since you were 2 years old. At what point did you realize you could have a future in this sport?
I think I've always wanted to be a professional since I was about 8 years old. That's always been my dream. I think when I started winning my first couple of tournaments when I was around 15 or 16, that was more when I started to realize that I wanted to do this for a living. I played my first professional events when I was 16. I got invites into those and won amateur tournaments, which got me invites. And like just being surrounded by so many of the world's best players, like when I played the Australian Open 4 years ago and Nelly Korda won, there was girls like Arya Jutanagan and Jin Young Ko, and then obviously some of the Aussie greats like Kari Webb, Hannah, Minji. Like just being surrounded by that sort of environment was a huge motivator and really like sort of said to myself, like, this is what I want to do for the rest of my life.
What did you know about Oklahoma State's golf program before committing, or before being recruited? I'll start there.
This sounds so bad, but I actually had no idea. We're back home, the college system in the US is like, we don't really know much about it. Like, I didn't know how big athletics was until I came over on my official visit, and then I saw like the size of the stadium. Like the size of Boone Pickens is bigger than our football stadium back home. And like I showed Dad the other day and he was just gobsmacked by the whole thing, like how huge everything is. And obviously there's places that have bigger stadiums than us as well. But as far as the golf program, my favorite player growing up was Ricky Fowler, and I had no idea that he went to school here. And that's where his sort of orange kind of came from. And then, I mean, we've had like Victor come through here, Peter Uihlein, Matt Wolf, like there's so many great players, Pernilla on the women's side. I had no idea about any of that. And then coming here, it was like, wow, I'm sort of part of golf royalty now. It was pretty surreal.
What made you ultimately decide to come here? Was it the golfers, or just because it's very different from how you grew up? Yeah,
like our universities back home don't have athletics like it does in the US. We basically go to university just to get a degree and to study. So coming here and seeing the athletic side of things was huge, and the facilities we have out at Carsten Creek is like nothing I had ever seen before. I feel like we're so lucky to have almost our own private golf course where we have complete control over what we do and how we practice. Obviously, like the facilities that we've got for all the other athletics is second to none. Like it's incredible. But yeah, I think what really sold it was just the team itself. When I came on my official visit, the girls were so welcoming, and I felt like it was a really nice and comfortable place to come, and like that has never changed. Like we're a massive family together and we support everyone day in and day out, and the facilities are incredible. Like you can't get a better place to practice than Carsten Creek.
Were you recruited by any other American school?
Yes, there was a couple. My top 3 that I looked at were Virginia, OSU, and Oregon. I actually did an official visit to Virginia, and I was setting up an official visit to Oregon, but I committed here before I went and did my official visit at Oregon.
So Oklahoma State was supposed to be stop number 2, but you just loved it so much.
Yeah, and then I committed before I went to Oregon.
You said your favorite golfer is Ricky Fowler. What do you like about him?
I think growing up, I just thought he was really cool. He's such a nice guy. Like everyone on tour says he's such an awesome person. And I loved his style, like the bright orange. Like orange has always been one of my favorite colors. And I had a Lucky Golf shirt growing up that was bright orange. So I think it was almost that kind of connection. And then he came for the men's pro-am like 2 years ago or something, a year and a half ago. And I remember seeing him and I almost started crying because I was just so starstruck by it. And I went up and I talked to him and his wife, and he actually signed a glove for me, which was awesome. I just couldn't believe it. And I was sort of just in awe at that moment. And I think I was very, very nervous and I didn't really speak very well. But I mean, it was such a cool moment to actually meet someone that I've looked up to my whole life.
What did you say to him?
I can't remember. I have no idea. I think I just sort of said like, I've really admired you my whole life growing up and I love your orange style and everything. And we ended up having a chat for like a good half an hour or something, but I honestly cannot remember what I said.
When did you find out he was an Oklahoma State alum?
When I came on the official visit, I'm pretty sure. I remember seeing his face all through like our Walk of Fame in Carsten, and I was like, oh my gosh, Ricky went here. And I think Mum had done some research online as well, and she's like looked up like the players that had been through the program and everything, and she kind of knew that Ricky had been here as well. But yeah, it was pretty cool to find out he had been on campus and played at Carsten and everything.
Athletic facilities aside, what was your first impression of Stillwater when you came to visit?
Small. I kind of like the small town vibes though, like just the college town kind of situation. I didn't really want to come to a big city because I felt like being a foreigner, it would be a bit overwhelming coming from like Australia that is very different to the US. I think coming into a smaller town made me feel a lot more comfortable, and I think my parents felt a lot more comfortable with that as well. But the campus is beautiful. I absolutely love walking on campus and going to class. And then, yeah, it's little, but it's perfect for what I want.
You moved from Australia, which had very strict COVID rules, to Oklahoma, which had a little bit more relaxed, but Oklahoma State still had mask mandates, social distancing in classes. How did that impact your adjustment to life in the United States?
When I first started, I actually had to isolate from my teammates for the first 2 weeks. So I wasn't allowed to come into contact with anyone. So that made the transition a lot harder because originally when we planned to come in the August before COVID started, like Mum or Dad was going to come over and help me settle in. But that obviously didn't end up happening because I was the only one who was granted exemption to leave the country. So I was taking this on my own to start off with, and then coming in and having to isolate from everyone was even harder because I couldn't really sort of find my feet as quickly as I wanted to. The first 4 weeks were really, really tough. I was homesick. I mean, with all the COVID restrictions, I wasn't actually going into class and meeting anybody either. So the first 4 weeks were a challenge, but I think after that, it got a little bit smoother. It was still a bumpy ride, but it was a lot easier.
Why did you have to isolate for 14 days?
I think just because I had come from a different country, like it was just a rule. And I think they wanted to make sure that I didn't have COVID or anything like while I was traveling, that I would then give to the rest of the team potentially, especially because we had tournaments like basically straight away going into the season. So they wanted to make sure everybody was safe before we got into the season basically.
The women's golf team is about 50% international athletes as well. How did that help with adjusting to life over here?
That was huge. Having girls that sort of understood where you were coming from. I mean, there was no other Australians, but I mean, Leanna was a huge help for me starting out. She had been over here for a couple of years, and that English sort of tie sort of felt like home in a sense. She understood kind of my slang in a way, and I could talk to her, and she helped me a lot to start off with. But I think it was just having people to relate to, like they knew your situation, they knew how homesick you felt, and it was hard being away from family. So it was kind of like we all had a mutual understanding of what life was like away from home.
You had a very unorthodox freshman year here. How has it changed since then?
I feel like college life is more what I expected it to be now. I go into class most days. I get to go out to the golf course and not have to fear the COVID situation. It was very up and down my first year. I mean, I wasn't even here my first semester, and then when I came here, I wasn't allowed to go into class because of COVID restrictions. Everything was online. It's just become like normal life, I guess, before COVID even happened. I really enjoy college life now.
Within that first year, your first semester on campus, was there ever a point where you were questioning if you made the right choice?
There was times, obviously, when I was at like the lowest points, when you're the most homesick, you feel like you want to go home. But I mean, with how busy our schedule is constantly, like every second week we're playing a tournament. So it's hard to think about the homesickness. Keeping my mind off stuff and keeping busy with the golf was probably the biggest thing that helped me, traveling every second week. I didn't go home for a whole year. So that was really, really difficult. I thought coming over here, I was going to be away for 5 months and then I'd be going back home in June, July again. But COVID was still crazy with restrictions, and Australia wasn't letting anyone in or out of the country at that point. So I had to wait until December to go back home. So I spent a whole year away, my like freshman / first semester sophomore year. And then I quarantined in a hotel for 2 weeks when I went back to Australia to then see my family for 2.5 weeks.
You flew back to Australia, sat in a hotel for 2 weeks, saw your family for 2 weeks, then came back?
Yes.
What did you do in June of July between your freshman and sophomore year?
I traveled like the whole time. I played a whole heap of tournaments just around the country. I went down to Mexico for 11 days and had a holiday down there. I basically just tried to bounce from place to place because I didn't have any like living accommodation on campus because I was living in the dorm rooms and then we had to move out of the dorm rooms. So I didn't actually have anywhere to live in Stillwater. And Golf Australia actually has a house in Orlando that we've had for a couple of years now, which is open to any Australians that are in the US, and you can go and live there for free, and you just have to like figure out transportation around to the golf courses and food and stuff. But it's a great little place, and I actually spent a couple of weeks there as well, living with just the Aussies, which was kind of a home away from home, which was really, really nice.
Were you traveling by yourself that entire time?
Yeah.
What was that like?
It was scary. I think I've done so much travel when I was younger that I felt comfortable doing that, but it just kind of got lonely most of the time because I didn't have any of my teammates, I didn't have any of my family. I was bouncing from place to place. I saw friends here and there at tournaments, but for majority of the time I was in hotel rooms by myself and Ubering by myself. So, I mean, it was an experience, that's for sure, but I don't know, traveling by yourself is a lonely thing.
What did your parents say? You had no other option, but what did they say when they found out you were traveling this foreign country alone?
Well, I mean, considering I couldn't go home, they actually helped me book everything, and they were fine with it. I think they stressed a little bit because I'm a 19-year-old traveling around the US by myself. But I mean, I call them every day. I make sure that they get updates when I leave a place and get to a place so they know I'm safe. So I think there was that level of comfort, but at the same time, as parents, you're always going to stress about your daughter being halfway across the world traveling by themselves.
What did you learn about yourself during those 2 months traveling?
I think just as a person, like I'm a lot stronger than I realize. I can get through a lot more than I realize. That whole year being away was a big eye-opener, I think. I'm really close to my family and it's so hard to be away from them, but just getting through that sort of lonely period I think has helped me moving forward because I'm a stronger person and I think a stronger golfer for it as well.
How often do you get back to Australia now that things are back to normal in a sense?
I try and go home every 6 months now. I was able to go home over Christmas time for nearly 2 months actually, which was the longest period I had been at home in 2 years. So that was really awesome. I got to see all my family, all my friends. I'm thinking about going home this sort of summer, winter back home, but there's a lot going on at the moment that I'm not really sure about what my schedule's going to look like. I know that I have to be in the US for all of June, but then July is sort of up in the air at the moment.
For people who don't realize how big Australia is, how long does it take you? Because Perth is way over there.
Yes, Perth is the most isolated city in the world. Usually the quickest way is to go from Perth to Melbourne, which is like a 4-hour flight, and then Melbourne to Dallas is 17 hours. So it's a really long way, but during COVID when I was going to and from the US, they didn't have any flights going from like Melbourne or Sydney to Dallas, so I actually had to go the complete opposite way, and that is so much longer. So I was going Perth to Doha, which was like 12 and a half hours, 11-hour layover in Doha, and then Doha to Dallas was like 17 hours.
That's insane.
It was brutal.
I've done Melbourne to LA, and that's like 14, and then LA to the East Coast. So
yeah.
But that 12, 11, and 12 is...
It was brutal.
Brutal. And you did that how many times?
2 or 3 times. Yeah, it was a lot.
And then you just drive back from Dallas, or did you fly from Dallas to Stillwater?
I was flying from Dallas to Stillwater, but most of the time when I come back now, I go to Ashton's house, and Ashton and I will drive from Dallas to Stillwater because she likes to have the company for the drive.
That works out for everybody.
Mm-hmm. It's perfect.
What are the things that you have to do when you do get home?
See all my family. That is like a number one. I love catching up with my friends, and I always like see my swing coach when I'm back home. Like that is number one thing that I have to do because communication with him is over the phone most of the time over here, unless he comes to the US, because he works with Minji and Hannah and Minwoo. So he's over in the US every now and again, but it's very hard and very rare that I get to see him. So when I'm home, I try and see him as much as possible. I love going to the beach. The beach is like one of my favorite things, going out on our boat, walking the dogs and everything like that.
You said in the very beginning of the interview, it's been a very big week for you, coming off a team and individual Big 12 title. You were also just named to the Palmer Cup International team. What was your reaction when you got that news?
It was exciting. I've been working towards that for the whole year, basically. I actually got a phone call, not yesterday, the day before, getting the official invitation. So I knew before they announced it yesterday on TV. But yeah, it's a huge goal that I've ticked off my bucket list. So I'm super, super stoked to be able to go and play.
For those who don't know, what is the Palmer Cup International team?
So it's a combination of 12 girls and 12 guys from the college system. It's based off our golf stat rankings and how we finish in tournaments. So consistency is key in the Palmer Cup rankings, basically. The top 6 in the rankings automatically qualify, and then there's 6 committee picks. And we get to actually play with one of the guys on the international team. It's kind of like a Ryder Cup format. You play in a 4-ball, so you team up with one of the guys and you get to play with them, but there's also an individual match play component as well. So we play against the US team.
And when will that take place?
I think I have to leave on like the 5th of June. So it's like that sort of week.
Where is it?
It's at Laurel Valley Golf Course in Pennsylvania.
You're coming off your first win of the season, the Big 12 title. How do you plan to carry that momentum into the upcoming regional tournament?
I think I've carried the momentum really good for like the whole season so far. I don't think this season I finished outside the top 20. So I feel like my game's in a really, really good spot at the moment, and in a consistent sort of scoring place as well. I think it's just not getting ahead of myself, have my moment of glory, and then it's back to business. Just have to go out and do the same thing again. And I think as a team, we're in a really good spot. It's more about the team aspect now, because if we don't do well as a collective, as a team, then we won't make it to nationals, and our end goal is to make it to nationals. So it's a big focus to just get back into practice, put in the hard work, and then the rest will take care of itself.
What would it mean to end this season with a regional and or national title?
That would be awesome. I mean, a couple of years ago, we gave ourselves a taste at nationals. I mean, we came second as a team, which was huge. We would have loved to get the win, but obviously it didn't go our way that day. But we know what it's like to compete. There's girls on this team that were there at that national 2 years ago, so everyone knows what that feeling is like, and we want to have that buzz again. The sort of energy that builds around that is huge, and we usually have the whole team go out and support at nationals, and I think that really helps as well.